The war that engulfed Valeria would be known as the Heim Conflict. There it is. Credits. Go ahead and mark that credits. All right, Tactics Ogre. Let us cling together has been conquered. And quite happy with this one. I got my thoughts here. I've had my thoughts ready for about 3 days now. And, I just kept on delaying it. So my overall thoughts on the game is this is actually a mighty fine tactics game. It's so good that when I think of how I would want to design a tactics game, I would probably take a lot of the great ideas that Tactics Ogre has and kind of implement them on my own. There's a lot of really cool ideas that are actually really well executed in this game, and it really does lend itself to be one of the better, if not the best, tactics game out there. So I'm extremely happy with this game. Very, very happy. You beat it. I was working. Yeah, the ending just kind of crept up on us. Let's see. For the story, was it satisfying? In some ways it was, but in some ways it wasn't. We didn't find Lancelot and kill him, and I believe that guy is the crux of everything. He can probably bring the Dark Knights back, so that's a little plot thread that I missed out on. I don't know if that was a side quest or something, but that one's missing. But for the most part, we took out the rest of the Dark Knight leadership, so perhaps there's nothing left to say, but I will say it's moderately satisfying. There could be some post-game stuff. There's something that I'm going to mention later, but I'll mention it now. And one of the things that I really appreciate about this game is it's very grounded when it comes to supernatural stuff. At the end of there, we got, our ogre boss or whatever that's, filled with all kinds of crazy magic and, what have you. But the entire game is more or less about knights and wizards, fighting each other on the battlefield. And you don't have to worry about, demons raining from the sky or something like that. So I appreciate, how grounded it is. I know there's magic in here, but it's a relatively grounded game. And a lot of tactics games do like to, go off the walls, I suppose, and kind of add in all kinds of supernatural stuff. So that was a very satisfying part of it. Did it feel complete? I still think the Lancelot Tartaros, that is a loose end, a very important loose end. I'm hoping we get something about that. So I would say, other than that, it feels complete. I'm guessing we'll get like an after credits scene or something like that with Lancelot, or that was a side quest. Feel free to let me know in the chat if that was a side quest. How was the pacing? I have here quite good throughout the game in terms of advancing the war. The time skips are rough though. I wasn't a big fan of the time skips. I don't think those needed to be a thing. Then again, the game is pretty long, so I can kind of understand the time skips. But I do think it would have been more interesting if we got to play out the war more closely together in terms of days or weeks. If you want to skip a week or a couple of days, I'm cool with that. But 3 months, there might have been a time skip that had a year in there or something like that. I think that's a little bit too much time. But other than that, I was quite happy with how on point the story kind of takes you, and even some of the side missions actually kind of felt relevant to what was going on. So that was really nice as well. Thoughts on the story? Politics are pretty hard for me to follow without extensive time spent in them. I recognize the country names and many of the characters we've seen on multiple occasions, but I don't think I've spent enough time with the political battles. Maybe that's on purpose. So one of the things about politics and games is if you don't spend enough time learning about the politics, it kind of just goes over my head. And that kind of happened in this game. I think there was a lot of elements where there was... Okay, I have to read this. Well, no, y'all can read this. There was a lot of elements where I wasn't getting the significance of everything, and I could have done better for that. So there's that. And he's giving a speech. The text is going way too fast for me to read anyway. Oh, you think Lancelot has a story that goes through multiple games, you think? Oh. I thought this was the last game. Oh! That was unexpected. That was unexpected. Where'd you get that gun from? Yes, there's no sudden appearance of a supernatural big bad. Yeah, I appreciated that. Do you dislike peanuts as well as peanut butter? No, I like peanuts. Peanuts are fine. I think you don't have a real-world context of political and historical events. Politics and games fail. I don't necessarily think it's that. I just think that there's machinations going on, and I don't know the significance of them because I don't know the location names of places. I don't know what strongholds are particularly difficult or powerful or have this or have that. There's a lot of circumstances that occur in this game that a little bit more attention could have been given to them, I suppose. Bad ending? I'm not sure. I'm gonna assume so. I think I was on the neutral route. Maybe if I had Katua, things would have been better. But it's fine. Yeah. Let's see. To that end, I feel a little distant from the story. My arc, I don't know what I meant there, but I'll just read it. My arc, I was a grunt. I was more of a grunt than a decision maker, which certainly fits the context. That's in regards to maybe my distancing from the politics was actually on purpose, because the whole arc of Denim is he's a grunt working for Duke Ronway, So if you kind of look at it from that perspective, you're not going to know the significance of the machinations. You're just expected to follow orders and make sure that they're carried out. So in that particular context, I can kind of understand, that as an excuse for why it is like that. And, some ways I appreciate that. I like that the story and the events are mostly grounded in its reality. I went over this. There aren't demon lords raining down from the sky, taking over, or people turning into crazy monsters. It's a war story with magic and undead and normal monsters. I know that it sounds a little crazy, but it's more grounded than I would have expected, because a lot of tactics games really aren't. So I like that. There are different paths you can go on for the story, uh, and those are cool ways to change things up. Uh, Apparently, typing is hard as well as reading. I was unsure if these paths actually change the story in any meaningful way, but I can confirm that at least a few missions are different, likely more than a few. Um, I would imagine the game ends the same, but the journey to get to the end looks to be different depending on what path you take. You can recruit different characters, you can see different missions, and in turn experience different plot points. However, I think main, all of the main decision making in this game, I think fall under the same areas. At the beginning, you're going to make a decision whether you're going to kill all the villagers or you're going to disobey orders. Um, in like the middle, you're going to decide whether you're going to uh, join back up with Duke Ronway or not. I think like there are set points that you have to reach, but your journey to get to those points are different. And I think that's pretty cool. It's kind of hard to do it various other ways, of course, but the way it was implemented is actually nice. The Knights of Lotus betraying each other was quite the plot twist. Wasn't expecting that. Yeah, I really thought there was going to be some other stuff going on there. Uh, but I guess, when you're evil, you're evil to everybody, not just the good guys or the wannabe good guys or the guys that pretend to be the good guys. Apparently, you're evil to bad guys too, especially the bad guys that you are bad guys with. For the writing, the style of speech used is pretty difficult to read, but with that said, the characters are done extremely well. Yeah, the I don't know what the technical term for it is. Dialect, perhaps. Uh, it's a little tough to read. I wasn't a fan of that at all, but it didn't make the game, I guess, more difficult to understand. It was just trying to actually read what they're saying. Even it made sense. It just was difficult to read. But anyways, for gameplay mechanics and design, what gameplay elements stand out? Crafting may very well be the worst part of this game. um, yeah. I don't know if I even have it here, but I really do appreciate that there is crafting in this game. I think the crafting adds some new dynamics to this game that some other tactics games don't actually do or implement. And I think it's cool that there's this other section of the game that you can engage in and improve your equipment. And, you don't have to invest much into. I have to be careful about how I say this, but I'll just add an addendum afterwards. Um, you don't have to invest a lot into the crafting system to gain, the great parts of it. However, you can only craft one item at a time. If you need 5 iron ore in order to make 5 iron bars, you're crafting 10 times. That's particularly obnoxious. What I don't have here is crafting is percentage based, which means if you have a 99% chance to craft something and that 1% chance happens, you lose the crafting materials. I'm definitely not a fan of these two situations occurring in tandem, mostly because it just encourages save scumming. And if it's something that I want to talk about someday on the podcast that will someday happen, is if your systems are encouraging save scumming, are the systems good systems? Or is the save scumming and the temptation to do so is that the issue. And I don't have those answers yet. We'll come to that when we come to that, but um at the very least, the implementation of percentage based crafting with having to craft things one at a time does not lead to a fun experience. You can, however, randomly acquire 2 items instead of one when you're crafting, which is cool. I thought this was pretty neat. I was on the lookout for a triple craft, but I didn't quite see one. But randomly being able to get more of the items that you're trying to craft is great. And that's a nice little bone that they throw you. Crafting an item doesn't require money, just the materials, which is cool. Um, there is a small caveat that, if you don't have the materials, you have to buy them, but you can buy the materials. Like everything that you need to craft something, I believe is purchasable, with the exception of actual pieces of equipment, which you either need to craft or find. And that in of itself is actually really cool. Most games out there will have you go to some mines or something like that and kill some golems and hope they drop the iron ore that you need to craft iron ingots. So I really like the approach that they took with that aspect of the crafting. And then the last thing, crafting is 100% optional, which means while it can be made better, you can ignore it and not care. And ultimately, that just negates everything that I have for criticisms about it. You don't have to engage in the crafting. You don't need the craftable items to progress in the game. It's just another system that's available to you. It's incredibly obnoxious to use. The rewards from it are incredibly useful and really nice, but it's optional. So if you don't like doing it, don't do it. The base classes really do feel like the most powerful classes in the game. It's strange that Tactics Ogre doesn't encourage class swapping. We kind of talked about this a couple of days ago, or yesterday, or the day before that, what have you. Um, I really never got the feeling that this game made the other classes out to be useful. In fact, we got a really nice kind of build up with Denim there when he swapped over to the Lord from the Knight. It took a very long time for him to be viable, and even as he caught up in levels per se, and he had all of his old equipment back, he was still taking more damage and doing less damage than he was when he was the Knight. So there is some sort of large drawback that is being given to when you're swapping classes. And that's something that I don't quite understand, what's going on there. I wish there was a better way to encourage class swapping that didn't feel so punishing. And part of that might be because you level classes at a time rather than characters at a time. But that's kind of another discussion for another time. Or maybe just a little bit further down my list of talking points here. Changing classes is in a weird space for me. Do I prefer any character able to become nearly any class, provided I have the class marks, or do I prefer to unlock classes per character? This is something that I've been kind of wrestling with throughout this playthrough. For example, there are other games out there where you level the character, not the class. In this game, you level the class, not the character. And so they both have their weaknesses, but Tactics Ogre's implementation seems to have, we'll just say, more drastic weaknesses that you have to overcome. If you're swapping your class to a level 1, that character is basically non-existent. Uh, Maybe if you swapped it to some sort of caster, you might be able to use some buffs and maybe some debuffs or something like that. But that character is going to get 1 or 2 shot by most enemies that you're engaging with. So I really do feel like this game encourages you to pick a class very early on and stick with that class as long as possible. Whereas if you're leveling the character, you can swap to any which class you want, and the only issue is learning your abilities back rather than gaining all of your stats back. And maybe that's the crux of it. The idea that I need to purchase or acquire rare drops from enemies in order to become a class has some excitement, but it's mostly obnoxious. We were kind of talking about this as well, that the availability of classes is kind of a big issue because of how the systems are kind of stacked on top of each other. We get a Fusilier in chapter 4, like the very end of chapter 4, basically. And to swap to a Fusilier is a little ridiculous, like that late in the game. The only way that you can make that class viable is by grinding it back up to the level that your characters are currently at. And once again, what we saw with the Lord is that takes a ridiculously long time. Denim is level 26 on the save that I have yet to save over, and he hasn't even caught up yet. So there's that. The flexibility of swapping classes so freely is great, although because there are so few viable classes, is there even a point? I think that's just kind of food for thought. When you have so many interesting classes on the surface, but they're so risky to actually use, it's just another type of system that weighs against you when you want to try out new, cool, interesting things. Dionysus was a ninja for a while, and my goodness, was he a very useless ninja. Does unlocking classes feel more rewarding? What if the class viability problem still existed? I have no idea what I mean by that. I guess in the sense of, instead of getting classes from class marks, if I unlocked classes in a more traditional way, like if you reach level 5 with a certain class, you unlock this other class, or maybe with a certain character, you unlock that class. I don't know. I guess that's food for thought as well. Something that I feel is consistent about tactics games is unit deployment. I wish it were consistent throughout the game. It makes little sense why I can have 8 units on one map, but 12 units on another. This was, I guess, kind of annoying for me, and it slows down the game a little bit more than it needs to. I also think that maps really should be designed either from the start to have your max number of units. And I can understand why they wouldn't want to, they're kind of easing you into the game. And that there's a fair argument there. I guess I just prefer you either start with the max number of units right away. That way you learn the dynamics that you have right away. And as you go, or the cap just keeps increasing until it gets that max, and you keep that cap for the rest of the game. I don't think that tactics games should have one-on-one battles. I don't think tactics games should restrict your units down to a certain number. Those battles to me are never exciting or fun. They're obnoxious because you spend the entire game with a unit or a squad of soldiers, and then you're expected to not use them. You know, the whole point of a tactics game is to have a team of soldiers that complement each other, and you use them to defeat your enemies. You know, um, for, a good example is when Denim was fighting Vice in the castle, and as a knight, it took me like 45 minutes to beat him, and and for all intents and purposes, I was cheesing the fight. You know, if I didn't knock him off the ledge for the 19 or 22 damage, that fight could have taken hours. You know, it's ridiculous. Um, I should also be able to see the map I'm deploying on in addition to unit placement. I should be able to inspect the enemy and form a strategy prior to the battle beginning. I don't know what it is about tactics games that don't let you do this. I'm guessing it's a hardware limitation. Uh, I have no idea, but there are great many tactics games out here that don't let you see the map and deploy your units with the information that you see on the map. Uh, I know this is an old game, and it could just be an old game thing, but for future tactics games out there, you know, that needs to die. Um, let us see the map and inspect units and things like that. You can run from random battles, which is super nice and also very quick. Yeah, this was a huge surprise. What kind of games out there? What kind of tactics games let you run from random battles? I can't think of any. So I appreciated that a lot. Bows can attack outside of their listed range, which is super cool and super annoying. That old double-edged sword arrow. Yeah, you can attack enemies outside of your range, but enemies can attack you outside of their range. So it kind of levels itself out. But the mechanic itself is super neat. I dig it. I do kind of wish it worked for crossbows. Maybe if crossbows had um, like a the bullet drop off kind of thing. I don't remember the technical word for it, but you know, the longer it goes, the further it drops down until it eventually hits the ground. Despite there being multiple extremely difficult missions regarding terrain disadvantage, I think Tactics Ogre actually does a decent job of not overwhelming you with terrain disadvantage, so props there. Yeah, I gotta hand it to them. Um, Again, I've played tactics games out there that just pit you where the enemy's up here and you're down here, and you, like every other mission, you have to go up the hill to fight them. And those battles are not very fun. They're very difficult to navigate. So I appreciate that this game had a lot of flat levels. They gave me the high ground several times, which is more than I can say for other games out there that just never give you the high ground, or maybe once or twice give you the high ground. I'm very appreciative of of the level design that I've seen in this game. The skill system is actually quite nice. I like that there are class specific skills as well as ones that carry over to all of the available classes. I do like the system. I do wish that there were filter options a little bit better, because or if whenever you get a new one, it marks it as new. You know, like, hey, you leveled up. This is a new one on your list. That would be kind of cool. But overall, I do like the system, and I like that, you know, there's so many things to choose from. You can build your characters however you want, and that's neat. For combat, overall, I enjoy the battle system, but there are two things I enjoy less. RT, or recovery time, is affected by equipment, and I wish it wasn't so. And friendly fire with magic. There's a good balance of what the enemy can do, what I can do, except the enemy will never purposefully damage its ally. It knows how to thread the needle. I don't. I'm constantly trying to figure out what angle is acceptable. Trajectory on spells should have been a default thing. Also, it should have been a default thing on ranged attacks too. I think the trajectory tax is is not cool. I appreciate that there's an option for it, but you should be able to see your arc for the attack and know if it's going to fail or not. And I think that needs to be on spells as well. Uh, I don't think the enemy needed that particular advantage of, being a computer. I love that everyone can throw rocks without needing skills. Yeah, take that, Final Fantasy Tactics. I can throw rocks and I don't have to spend 90 skill points or however much it costs to throw Suckafu rocks. On the flip side, rocks do no damage in this game. And actually, uh, throwing rocks might be detrimental because it increases your recovery time. But I never tested that out for myself, so I'm not 100% sure. Um, Even when you're not playing XCOM, you're gonna get XCOM'd. I've got multiple disappointments throughout percentage-based attacks in this game, but you know, it happens. That's what happens. Sometimes you get hit with that 9%, and sometimes you miss with that 99%. It's whatever. For dungeons, I think I touched on that well enough. For cardinal sins, I don't have any cardinal sins down here, but I think it is worth noting that there are protect people missions that are kind of like escort missions, and that's rough times. Um, so I guess there's that to keep in mind. And then you could arguably say that backup party doesn't earn any experience. You you can you can throw that in there as well. But yeah. For miscellaneous, sound and music, solid music. I did listen to this OST a while back. I don't think this OST is particularly fantastic as a standalone sort of thing, but I do think that the music is quite fitting of the game and kind of the events that are happening. I do like that the music fits the particular scenario that you're in, and I never got bored or annoyed with like the battle musics and things like that. They helped keep me engaged, so that was nice. There's no voice acting except for on certain chapter openers, but I did like what I heard. It was done very well. The graphics, I love the visual style for tactics games like this. It fits so well. The pixel art just works so well with tactics games, and I love it so much. Uh, the invention of the tactics genre and this particular style of visuals and aesthetics is perfect for it. The amount of sprites is really cool. Yeah, there's quite a few sprites. There's quite a few in betweens and animations for the sprites as well. I like that as a lot, or I like that a lot as well. Replay value. I kind of touched on this earlier. I just didn't explicitly say it, but I actually think this game has some replay value to it. While there are specific notes that you're required to meet, and I think the ending is more or less going to be the same. The journey there is going to change depending on how you make your choices. So I actually think there's some replay value in this game. I think there's a lot of merit to trying to play this game on the law route and then the chaos route and seeing how everything changes and what characters you meet and what characters you can recruit and the different maps you might even discover. And so the last section I have, if the developer is watching, this is definitely one of my favorite tactics games that I've ever played. I've been I've been curious if this game actually stood or still held up as one of my favorite games of all time, and I think it does hold up there. There are some falters with some of the systems, but I think this is kind of one of the premier examples of how a tactics game should look and should function, and how it can offer so much with arguably so little, you know? So I would definitely say that this game is absolutely fantastic. We need more Tactics Ogres games out there. I don't know why there's not any more being made, but we need like 8 sequels, and we need them now. So, just to reiterate my overall thoughts, I think the game is fantastic. I like it a lot, and yeah, I'm going to save now. We're going to see if there's what happens. My controller turned off. We're going to see what happens after this. Alright, you can now use the World Turret. The World Turret allows you to move your party between various points in the game's timeline. These points are called anchor points, and there are several scattered throughout each chapter of the game. Select World Turret from the Warren Report to view the timeline and move to the desired anchor point. You will still be able to use all unlocked game features even if you move to the earlier point in the timeline. Refer to the play guide if you want more information. Alrighty then. Don't see any new stuff. Wait. Oh. Warren Report. Talk. Okay, so there is some stuff. Okay, yeah. I think I'm gonna wrap up this here today video thing. I'll be back with more Tactics Ogre because I'm gonna do the Palace of the Dead. It's 100 floors. I don't think I necessarily have to do 100 floors. I might be able to skip some floors and things like that from my recollection. But I've never beaten the Palace of the Dead. I think I've only gotten to floor 30 or 40 or something like that before calling it quits. It's some rough times. So, yeah, I'm gonna end this thoughts video here.